Brothers in Christ, we have gathered here today to welcome a new novice into our midst. Dear brother, forget your former life and embrace your new vocation in the community of the monks of St. Benedict. The service of God, obedience, and endurance of all discomfort. These are the cornerstones and succor of our order, which on this day shall become your own. Accept your new name and wear it with honor. Welcome, brother.
When Kingdom Come Deliverance launched in February 2018, it immediately stood apart from other role-playing games. There were no dragons or magic. Instead, the game dropped players into a brutally realistic version of 15th century Bohemia, where you play as Henry, whose life destroyed by war sets out on a path of revenge and duty. Kingdom Come Deliverance features historically accurate armour, complex sword combat and political intrigue, making it stand out to other RPGs. Despite the success Warhorse had had with both Kingdom Come Deliverance and its sequel, many players may not realise just how difficult it was to create the first game. Behind the scenes, Warhorse Studios had to build an RPG framework on top of a game engine never designed for such a simulation, making the process tedious. To fully understand the complexities involved, it's helpful to look back at how the project began and the ambitious vision behind its development. The origins of Kingdom Come Deliverance dates back to 2009, when Czech game developer Daniel Vávra left the studio 2K Czech. Vávra already had an impressive resume. He had directed the original Mafia, which received critical praise for its storytelling and writing, and he had worked as a designer and screenwriter on Mafia 2. But Vávra had a grand ambition that would move away from the Mafia world of the 20th century America and towards something radically different. A historical grounded medieval RPG. Vávra already had a vision of what he wanted. His checklist was 1. The game would take place during the political upheaval of 15th century Bohemia, and 2. It would follow a fictional character whose life becomes entangled in a conflict between two rival kings. Commercially, it was risky. At the time, the RPG market was dominated by fantasy titles like The Elder Scrolls and The Witcher. Investors understood fantasy worlds and established franchises. According to Warhorse developers, the gaming industry was in a strange transitional period, meaning publishers were uncertain about the future of console hardware. At the same time, the market was shifting in unexpected directions. Browser games and Facebook titles were attracting massive audiences, and many publishers were becoming increasingly cautious about funding large, risky projects. A game about medieval peasants, political intrigue, and historically accurate sword fighting, that was much harder to pitch. As a result, early investor pitches were rejected. From their perspective, the concept was risky. This almost caused the project to collapse before it had begun. The developers described the situation bluntly. The project had effectively reached a sink or swim moment. If they failed to secure funding soon, Warhorse Studios would likely be forced to shut down entirely. The breakthrough came when Czech billionaire Zdeněk Bakala agreed to fund the development of a prototype. With that funding secured, Warhorse Studios was officially founded on the 21st of July 2011. Initially, Warhorse was a small team of roughly 30 developers, with plans to recruit more as the project progressed. Even at this early stage, the project's ambition was enormous. The team wanted to create a large, open world with non-linear quests, historically accurate combat, dynamic NPC behaviour, branching storylines, and a fully simulated medieval environment. Warhorse had to run all of this inside a game engine. Choosing the right engine would soon become one of the most crucial decisions the team faced, setting the stage for the next phase of development. After much consideration, Warhorse licensed the CryEngine 3 in February 2012. CryEngine was chosen for its visual power, having previously been used to create stunning environments in games like Crysis. Its strengths included advanced lighting, dense forests, detailed terrain, and realistic environmental rendering, features ideal for recreating Bohemia's forests, castles, villages, and fields. However, a key challenge emerged. CryEngine had been developed primarily for first-person shooters, with the focus being on combat, enemy behaviour, and player movement. By contrast, a complex open-world RPG demands systems to manage quest progression, dialogue branches, inventory, crime and reputation, NPC routines, economy, crafting, and player stats. As a result, Warhorse had to design and build a new system from the ground up, adapting CryEngine far beyond its initial purpose to support these unique demands. Over the next 17 months, the team built a working prototype. This prototype not only showcased the game's vision, but also served as a foundation for a fully functioning RPG system in CryEngine. Because the engine lacked key RPG features, the team had to design major components, including quest management, dialogue, inventory, and reputation, from scratch rather than relying on built-in tools. It's hard to quantify just how impressive of a feat it was that Warhorse successfully did this, especially when you consider the size of the team.
A sword such as this will bring honor to its bearer.
This is nice work. It's new, isn't it?
You know the trouble with an adventurous life, son? It can end before it gets started. I might teach you how to handle a sword, and then someone will shoot you with a crossbow.
Now, for the maiden bloodletting. Surely your father never would have imagined it would be your blood. Such miserable luck. To die by the sword you helped forge.
Sometimes I ask myself what it all means. Why does God allow such things to happen? All this slaughter and revenge, over and over.
Tell me, boy, who are you? What in hell's name happened?
I've come from Skalitz. They burned it to the ground, slaughtered everyone.
Who burned it to the ground?
That's him. That's the bastard who led the attack at Skalitz and killed my parents.
I'm sure we're all agreed that all this unrest must come to an end.
I finally have the feeling we're doing something worthwhile. We're helping to save the king.
Instead of saving his drunken majesty, I'd rather find that whoreson who murdered my parents, get the sword back from him, and skewer him with it.
To put a stop to this senseless war.
Creating a story grounded in real historical events introduced another challenge, balancing accuracy with storytelling. Developers began with a rough fictional framework for the story, but many of the game's quest and plot developments were inspired directly by historical events in the region. The setting itself was carefully chosen. The developers looked for a moment in Czech history that was both historically significant and geographically manageable for a game world. They eventually chose the political conflict surrounding Sigismund's invasion of Bohemia in 1403, which included attacks on economically important areas, including the region's silver mines. This historical context provided the backdrop for Henry's personal story. By combining fictional characters with real historical events, the developers could create a narrative that felt authentic while still allowing creative freedom. Many RPGs simplify melee combat into animation-based interactions. A sword swing triggers a set animation, and damage is calculated automatically if the target is within range. But Kingdom Come attempted something more grounded in the physical world. As a result, Warhorse invested heavily into motion capture for combat, walking, riding, and daily actions. Thousands of animations were captured for combat alone. The combat system used inverse kinematics to dynamically calculate weapon movements. This meant players could experience realistic sword fighting. This prevented gameplay from becoming too repetitive. When you fight in Kingdom Come Deliverance, the game calculates weapon trajectories, armor resistance, shield angles, and impact force in real time. This means that you can aim strikes in different directions and defend using historical techniques. Systems like this are extremely sensitive to performance issues. Even small frame drops can disrupt timing in real-time combat calculations. Warhorse had to carefully balance realism with stability. When combat calculations rely on precise timing and physics, technical problems such as frame rate instability can hurt gameplay responsiveness. Developers had to ensure that the combat system remained stable while running multiple systems in the game world. Warhorse also wanted NPCs to live believable lives. Instead of standing idle waiting for the player, characters would wake up, go to work, eat, sleep, respond to crimes, and remember the player's behaviour. That required building complex AI behaviour trees and daily schedules. Commit crimes and townspeople might become suspicious, build a reputation as a hero, and people might treat you differently. To support this behaviour, the developers had to expand CryEngine's AI systems far beyond their original design. For example, a villager might wake up in the morning, walk to work, perform tasks during the day, eat, visit the tavern, and eventually go home to sleep. This may sound simple, but simulating hundreds of characters doing this at once is hard. Each NPC requires pathfinding, behavioural decision making, memory of players' actions, and responses to crimes and reputation. CryEngine's original AI was built mainly for combat scenarios. Enemies would patrol an area, detect the player, and attack. Civilian life simulation required much more complexity. Warhorse expanded the engine with behaviour trees and persistent memory systems. This let NPCs maintain routines even when the player is not nearby. Every additional system increased the computational load. When hundreds of NPCs exit together, the performance becomes a constant concern. Beyond the technical systems, the sheer amount of content required for the game created additional production challenges. To recreate medieval Bohemia, the developers had to design towns, villages, castles and fortifications, forests and natural landscapes, and clothing and armour based on historical sources, as well as everyday objects like tools, carts and weapons. Historical authenticity was important to the team. Instead of inventing fantasy designs, Warhorse studied historical references to reproduce medieval life as accurately as possible. This meant researching architecture, clothing styles, weapon designs, social hierarchies, and economic systems. That research informed not only the visual design, but also gameplay systems including crime, reputation, and social interaction. For example, wearing expensive armour might influence how an NPC reacts to the player, while committing crimes could damage the player's reputation within specific communities. To add to this, clothing became a complex system. Players can have up to 16 pieces of clothing and armour to Henry. Each layer had to be animated correctly, avoid clipping, respond to movement, and calculate damage absorption. This level of detail increased the workload for animation and testing, making it one of the most difficult and complex features to implement. These details helped reinforce the illusion of a functioning medieval society. However, assembling this depth of content and interactivity required extensive development work, challenging the team to maintain their vision across every system. All of the design features, including world simulation, AI behaviour, layered clothing, realistic combat, and dynamic reputation, gave the game its unique identity, but they also made development harder. Each system interacted with the others, creating opportunities for bugs from unexpected interactions. Changes to AI could disrupt quest logic, combat could affect animation blending, clothing might impact collision detection. This complexity required extensive testing and careful planning. For a small studio, maintaining stability while expanding systems was a major challenge. With so many interconnected elements, the team constantly balanced ambition and stability, emphasizing the ongoing struggle that shaped the development of Kingdom Come Deliverance. Despite the prototype, Warhorse still struggled to secure major investors. Traditional investors still weren't convinced that the project would succeed. So in January 2014, the studio launched a Kickstarter campaign. The goal was $300,000, which represented roughly 10% of the estimated $5 million budget. When the Kickstarter campaign launched in January 2014, it wasn't just a marketing tool, it was a last chance. Failure would have meant the end of the studio, but the real purpose wasn't just funding, it was to demonstrate that there was an audience for this type of RPG. If players showed interest, investors might follow. The response exceeded expectations. The campaign reached its initial $300,000 in just 36 hours. Within weeks, the campaign had raised over $1.1 million. Eventually, more than 38,000 backers contributed over $2 million to the project. For the developers, the speed of that response was surprising. They had already conducted market research and built interest before launching the campaign, but the scale of the support exceeded expectations. More importantly, the Kickstarter campaign created something beyond funding. It created a community. Players became deeply involved in the development process, offering feedback, ideas and criticisms as the game evolved. That relationship between developers and the community would become an important part of the game's development, because when building a complex simulation-heavy RPG, feedback from players can reveal problems that even internal testing might miss. The campaign had succeeded, but success created a new challenge. Those promises now had to be delivered. With the success of the Kickstarter campaign, Warhorse Studios had proven that there was a global audience interested in a historically grounded RPG. But raising money was only the first step. The next challenge was turning that prototype into a fully playable game. One of the key promises made during the Kickstarter campaign was that backers would gain early access to the game during development. This allowed the community to follow the project closely and provide feedback as the systems evolved. The first major milestone came on the 22nd of October 2014, when Warhorse released the public alpha version of Kingdom Come Deliverance. This early build allowed players to explore the game's core mechanics while development was still going on. The alpha stage was not a finished experience. Many systems were incomplete or experimental, and large parts of the world were still under construction. But it gave developers something extremely valuable: real player feedback. Thousands of players were suddenly testing the game in ways that internal developers never could. Players experimented with combat mechanics, explored the world, tested quests, and inevitably discovered bugs and technical problems. For a system-heavy RPG like Kingdom Come, this kind of early testing was essential. Several months later, on the 3rd of March 2015, Warhorse released a beta version of the game to the backers. The beta represented a more stable version of the experience. more gameplay systems had been implemented, quests were expanded, and the world itself had begun to take its final shape. By this stage, Kingdom Come Deliverance was no longer simply a prototype, it was becoming a full RPG. But even with crowdfunding success and growing community support, the project still faced a major challenge. Crowdfunding had helped prove the game's potential, but launching a major RPG, especially on consoles, requires distribution, marketing, and production resources that are extremely difficult for a small studio to manage on its own. That changed on the 29th of September 2016, when Warhorse Studios announced it had signed a publishing agreement with Deep Silver. This deal was a crucial turning point for the project. Deep Silver would handle the publishing and distribution of the console versions of the game, as well as the retail PC release. For Warhorse, this partnership provided the infrastructure needed to bring the game to a global audience. Publishing support meant marketing campaigns, physical distribution, and access to console platforms, which are all areas where independent studios often struggle. At the same time, Warhorse maintained the creative vision that had defined the project from the beginning. By late 2016, the game had evolved from a risky, independent concept into a fully supported commercial RPG backed by a major publisher. But even with the support, the final stages of development would prove among the most challenging, because as the game became more complex, stabilizing it became harder. As development continued, the game accumulated systems such as alchemy, crime, simulation, reputation tracking, crafting, layering equipment, and survival mechanics. Each system interacted with the others. This created a classic development problem known as feature bloat. Feature bloat isn't just having too many ideas, it happens when the complexity of a project grows faster than the development team can stabilize it. Removing a feature late in development doesn't solve the problem either. Even if the visible feature disappears, the code and dependencies often remain. Warhorse later acknowledged that some features were cut too late in development, reducing the time available for optimization. After years of development, Kingdom Come Deliverance was finally released on the 13th of February 2018. The project had grown far beyond its original budget. The total cost reportedly reached 750 million Czech crowns, or roughly $36.5 million US. At the time of its release, the game reached a peak concurrent player count of 95,863 players on Steam. The game was also a commercial success, selling 500,000 units during its first 2 days, and selling over 1 million units within 2 weeks of its release. As of May 2025, the game has sold over 10 million units. The game was also nominated for a number of awards, including Best RPG, Best PC Game, and PC Game of the Year. Players praised the game's realism and world design, but the game also launched with bugs and performance problems. The launch required a large day one patch to address numerous technical issues. Despite those issues, the game achieved something rare. It delivered a deeply immersive medieval world that few RPGs have attempted before, and built a dedicated fanbase. Shortly after the first game was released, development began on Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. This time the studio had advantages it didn't have before: a larger team, experience with custom engines, and knowledge of what worked and what didn't. The developers described the studio as no longer being a team of punks trying to get the game out. Their design philosophy shifted towards easy to learn, hard to master. Systems were refined rather than expanded. The combat system was streamlined, reputation was made more detailed, and crafting features like blacksmithing were carefully implemented. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 meant Warhorse could develop the game they had always dreamt of, now that they had both the budget and the reputation behind them. From a development perspective, Kingdom Come Deliverance represents something unusual in modern game development. It was an attempt to build a simulation-heavy historical RPG inside an engine not originally designed for RPGs. CryEngine provided the visual foundation, but nearly every gameplay system had to be engineered by Warhorse themselves. The result was a game that pushed its technology and its developers to the limit. And in many ways, the real story of Kingdom Come Deliverance isn't just about medieval combat or political intrigue. It's about how a small studio pursued an unconventional vision and slowly turned that vision into one of the most distinctive RPGs of its generation.
The biggest thing is that that we proven that our philosophy behind the design of the game is correct. Many people said that the game is going to be boring because of that it's realistic, which is not true. Many people said that it's a niche, so nobody will buy it, even if it's good. Many people said that you need to do things in a way that everybody else does them, and we've proven that it's not necessary. The action or violence aspect is also important, so there's not much violence in the game, and it's still fun and interesting, and takes very long to like there's a lot of gameplay even without the violence. So it's all those things were quite hovering in the air when we were doing it, and I was a little bit afraid, okay, so maybe it's not going to work. So what we will do when it's done, and we will realize, oh, the world is too big and too empty. People have problems with that. What should we do? And they didn't have problems with it, so great.